They say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. For me, it started that way. The morning sun streamed through the windows of the bridal suite at the Grandview Country Club, casting golden light across my wedding dress as it hung pristine and perfect. Everything was falling into place exactly as I'd dreamed. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. But by the time the reception ended that evening, my sister Rebecca lay unconscious on the marble floor. My new husband was holding me as I sobbed, and a decorated Army general had just delivered the most devastating verbal takedown I'd ever witnessed. All because of a speech that was supposed to celebrate love, family, and new beginnings. This is the story of how one act of betrayal nearly destroyed my wedding day, and how justice came from the most unexpected source. My name is Sarah Mitchell. Well, Sarah Chen now, and I've always believed that family comes first. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, my younger sister Rebecca and I were inseparable. She was the artistic one, always sketching in her notebooks and dreaming of becoming a fashion designer. I was the practical sister, the one who made lists and planned everything down to the last detail. Our parents, David and Linda Mitchell, used to joke that together we made one complete person. Rebecca was 3 years younger than me, born when I was already walking and talking. From the moment she could crawl, she followed me everywhere. I taught her how to ride a bike, helped her with homework, and defended her from playground bullies. When she struggled with math in high school, I spent hours tutoring her every night until she finally understood algebra. When she wanted to apply to art school but was afraid our parents wouldn't support her dreams, I helped her prepare her portfolio and practiced her presentation with her dozens of times. The thing about Rebecca was that she had this incredible talent for making people feel special. She remembered everyone's birthday, always knew exactly what gift would make someone smile, and had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the most important person in the world. But she also had this other side, a jealous streak that would surface whenever she felt someone else was getting attention she thought she deserved. I first noticed it in high school when I made varsity soccer, and she didn't make the art club she'd applied for. Instead of being happy for me, she spent weeks making snide comments about jocks who peak in high school. When I got accepted to Oregon State University with a partial scholarship, she barely congratulated me, instead focusing on how unfair it was that academics got more recognition than creativity. But I always made excuses for her behavior. She was younger, she was finding herself, she was under pressure. I told myself that her jealousy came from insecurity, and that as her big sister, it was my job to support her through it. After college, I moved to Seattle and started working as a project manager for a tech company. The work was challenging and rewarding, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something meaningful. That's where I met James Chen, a software engineer with kind eyes and the most genuine laugh I'd ever heard. He was the son of immigrants from Taiwan, raised in California with values that perfectly aligned with mine: hard work, family loyalty, and treating everyone with respect. James and I dated for 2 years before he proposed. He planned this elaborate treasure hunt that took me to all the places we'd had our first dates, ending at the waterfront park where we'd first said, "I love you." When he got down on one knee as the sun set over Elliott Bay, I couldn't stop crying happy tears. Rebecca seemed genuinely excited about the engagement. She flew up from Portland the weekend after James proposed, and we spent hours looking through bridal magazines and Pinterest boards, planning every detail. She even offered to help with some of the wedding preparations, which touched me deeply. For once, it felt like we were truly sisters again, working together towards something beautiful. The wedding planning process brought out the best in both of us, or so I thought. Rebecca threw herself into helping me choose flowers, comparing venues, and even sketching ideas for centerpieces. She had such a good eye for design that I ended up incorporating several of her suggestions. When it came time to choose bridesmaids, she was my first choice for maid of honor. How could she not be? She was my sister, my closest family member aside from our parents. "I have the perfect idea for my maid of honor speech," she told me one evening as we addressed invitations at my apartment. "I've been working on it for weeks. It's going to be really special, Sarah. I want to tell everyone how amazing you are and how lucky James is to have you." I hugged her tightly, feeling grateful that my little sister wanted to honor me in such a public way. "You don't have to say anything elaborate," I told her. "Just speak from the heart. Trust me," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's going to be unforgettable." The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of final preparations. James and I decided to have the ceremony at the Grandview Country Club, a beautiful venue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. The guest list included about 150 people, family, friends, colleagues, and several of James's military buddies from his time in the Army Reserves. One of those friends was General Patricia Hawkins, a woman James had served under during his deployment to Afghanistan. She'd been his commanding officer during a particularly difficult tour, and James always spoke of her with enormous respect. General Hawkins was in her late 50s, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense. She'd retired from active duty, but still commanded attention whenever she entered a room. "She saved my life over there," James told me when we were finalizing the guest list. "Not just literally, though she did that too. She taught me what real leadership looks like. I'd be honored if she could be there." General Hawkins had RSVP'd with enthusiasm, writing a handwritten note about how excited she was to meet the woman who'd captured James's heart. I'd only spoken to her briefly on the phone, but her warmth and intelligence came through immediately. James warned me that she could be intimidating. She didn't suffer fools gladly and had a reputation for calling out bad behavior when she saw it. But he also said she was one of the most honorable people he'd ever known. The rehearsal dinner went perfectly. Rebecca gave a sweet, heartfelt toast about how happy she was to welcome James into our family. She talked about our childhood, sharing funny stories about my obsessive planning habits and how I used to practice walking in high heels around the house when I was 12. Everyone laughed. James squeezed my hand, and I felt overwhelmed with love for my sister and gratitude that she was being so supportive. After dinner, Rebecca pulled me aside. "Sarah, I just want you to know that tomorrow is going to be perfect. Your speech is safe with me, and I promise you're going to love what I've prepared." I was confused. "My speech?" "Rebecca, I'm not giving a speech. The bride doesn't usually—" "Oh, I know," she interrupted with that same smile. "I just meant that I'll take care of everything. You don't need to worry about anything." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. It was the night before my wedding, and I was probably just feeling pre-ceremony jitters. Rebecca had been nothing but helpful throughout the entire planning process. I had no reason to doubt her. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. I woke up in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, where I'd spent the night according to tradition. Rebecca was already up, bustling around making coffee and laying out breakfast. She seemed unusually energetic, almost manic in her cheerfulness. "Today's the day," she sang out as she handed me a cup of coffee. "I'm so excited I barely slept. I kept thinking about my speech and making sure I had everything perfect." My mom joined us in the kitchen, already dressed and ready to help me. "Get ready." "I'm so proud of both my girls," she said, wrapping us both in a hug. "Rebecca, honey, I know your speech is going to be beautiful. You've been working so hard on it." "It's definitely going to be memorable," Rebecca replied, and something about the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. The morning flew by in a blur of hair and makeup, photographs, and final preparations. Rebecca stayed by my side the entire time, helping with my dress, holding my bouquet, and making sure everything was perfect. She seemed genuinely happy, and I started to feel silly for my earlier concerns. The ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed of. James looked incredible, in his dress uniform, and when I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, I could see tears in his eyes. We'd written our own vows, and when James promised to love and support me for the rest of our lives, I knew without a doubt that I was marrying my best friend. Rebecca cried during the ceremony. Happy tears, I thought. She kept dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief and smiling at me whenever I caught her eye. During the recessional, she walked arm in arm with James's best man, Marcus Thompson, another Army buddy who'd served with James and General Hawkins. The cocktail hour was perfect. Guests mingled on the terrace, enjoying appetizers and drinks, while the photographer captured candid moments. Rebecca was in her element, charming everyone she met and making sure all the details were running smoothly. She'd changed into a stunning navy blue dress that complemented her auburn hair perfectly, and several people commented on how elegant she looked. General Hawkins approached me during the cocktail hour, and I was immediately struck by her presence. She was shorter than I'd expected, maybe 5'6", but she carried herself with such confidence that she seemed to fill the entire space. She wore a simple black dress with a string of pearls, and her handshake was firm and warm. "Sarah, you look absolutely radiant," she said with a genuine smile. "James is a lucky man, but more importantly, he knows it. That's the sign of a man worth marrying." We talked for several minutes about James, about their time in Afghanistan, and about her transition to civilian life. She was funny and engaging, with a sharp wit that put me immediately at ease. When she excused herself to find James, I felt grateful that he had such incredible people in his life. Dinner was served at 7 o'clock, and everything proceeded flawlessly. The food was delicious, the wine flowed freely, and the conversation at our table was lively and warm. James and I sat at the head table with our wedding party, my parents and James's parents, David and Helen Chen, who'd flown in from San Francisco. As we finished the main course, Rebecca stood up and tapped her champagne glass with her knife. The room gradually quieted as everyone turned their attention toward the head table. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "If I could have everyone's attention," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "As Sarah's maid of honor and sister, I'd like to say a few words about the bride." I smiled at her encouragingly, feeling a warm glow of anticipation. Whatever she'd prepared, I knew it came from her heart. Rebecca held up a folded piece of paper and cleared her throat. "I've known Sarah longer than anyone else in this room," she began, "and there are so many things I could tell you about my big sister." She paused, unfolded the paper, and her entire demeanor shifted. The warm smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "But I think it's time everyone knew the real Sarah Mitchell." A chill ran down my spine. Something was very, very wrong. "Sarah has always been the perfect daughter," Rebecca continued, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "The one who got good grades, who followed all the rules, who never caused any trouble. But what you don't know is how she's always made sure everyone else looked bad by comparison." The room was completely silent now. I could feel James tense, beside me, his hand finding mine under the table. My parents looked confused and alarmed. General Hawkins was watching Rebecca with an expression I couldn't read. When we were kids, Sarah would help me with my homework, but only so she could feel superior when I struggled. She'd defend me from bullies at school, then come home and tell our parents every mistake I'd made that day. She painted herself as the perfect big sister while making sure I always looked like the failure. My mouth fell open. None of this was true. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare, watching my sister, my maid of honor, systematically destroy me in front of everyone I loved. Rebecca was just getting started. "She tutored me in math, sure," Rebecca continued, her voice growing stronger and more venomous with each word. But she made sure everyone knew how much smarter she was than me. She'd sigh dramatically whenever I didn't understand something, then explain it in the most condescending way possible. And when I finally got a B+ on my algebra test, did she celebrate with me? No. She told our parents that if I'd just applied myself from the beginning, I could have gotten an A. I felt sick to my stomach. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Some guests were looking down at their plates, clearly uncomfortable. Others stared at Rebecca in shock. My mother had gone pale, and my father's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscles in his neck. And college applications, Rebecca went on, warming to her theme. Sarah made such a big show of helping me with my art school portfolio. But what she really did was subtly undermine my confidence every step of the way. "Are you sure this piece represents your best work?" she'd ask. "Maybe you should consider a backup plan in case the art thing doesn't work out." She planted seeds of doubt while pretending to be supportive. James squeezed my hand tighter. I could see confusion and anger warring on his face. He knew me well enough to know that Rebecca's words were lies, but the public nature of this humiliation was something neither of us had prepared for. "When I didn't get into my top-choice art school," Rebecca continued, "Sarah was right there with her fake sympathy. "Everything happens for a reason," she said. "Maybe this is the universe telling you to pursue something more practical." She never once acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, she'd played a role in sabotaging my confidence. General Hawkins was watching this unfold with the focused attention of someone analyzing a tactical situation. Her expression remained neutral, but I could see her taking mental notes of every word, every gesture, every reaction in the room. But the real Sarah Mitchell came out when she moved to Seattle, Rebecca said, her voice rising. Suddenly, she was too busy for family calls. Too important to come home for holidays unless it was convenient for her schedule. She'd call once a month, if we were lucky, and spend the entire conversation talking about her amazing job, her wonderful new life, her perfect boyfriend. This was particularly painful because there was a grain of truth to it, twisted beyond recognition. I had been busy establishing my career. I had sometimes cut phone calls short when work demanded my attention, but I'd never intended to be dismissive or superior. I thought Rebecca understood the pressures I was under. And when she got engaged, Rebecca's voice dropped to a mock whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. She called me, crying tears of joy. Not because she wanted to share her happiness with her sister, but because she wanted an audience for her triumph. She'd found her perfect man, her perfect life, and she needed someone to witness just how perfect everything was for perfect Sarah. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not like this. Rebecca was destroying everything I held dear, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of breaking down completely. She asked me to be her maid of honor, Rebecca continued, and I was so touched. I thought, finally, Sarah needs me for something. Finally, I get to be important in my perfect sister's perfect life. But even that was about her ego. She didn't choose me because she loves me or values our relationship. She chose me because having her sister as maid of honor would look good in the wedding photos. The guests were beginning to murmur among themselves now. Some people were clearly buying into Rebecca's narrative, nodding along with her words. Others looked skeptical, glancing at me with sympathy. But the damage was being done either way. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, my own sister was systematically destroying my reputation in front of everyone who mattered to me. She put me to work immediately, Rebecca said, her tone becoming more bitter. Planning this, organizing that, addressing invitations, researching vendors. It was like having an unpaid wedding assistant. And every suggestion I made was met with that condescending smile and a pat on the head. "That's a cute idea, Rebecca, but I think we'll go in a different direction." This was completely false. I'd incorporated several of Rebecca's ideas into our wedding plans, and I'd made sure to credit her contributions to anyone who would listen. But she was rewriting history in real time, and there was nothing I could do to stop her. But the worst part, Rebecca said, building to what I could sense was her climax, was watching her plan this whole elaborate celebration of herself. Because that's what this is, isn't it? It's not about love or commitment or building a life together. It's about Sarah getting to be the center of attention for an entire day, wearing a white dress that cost more than most people's cars, surrounded by flowers and music, and everyone telling her how beautiful and special she is. James started to stand up, his face dark with anger, but I grabbed his arm. Creating a scene would only make things worse. Rebecca wanted drama, wanted chaos, wanted to see me lose control. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. She's not marrying James because she loves him, Rebecca declared, her voice ringing through the suddenly electric silence. She's marrying him because he fits perfectly into her image of the life she thinks she deserves. He's successful, he's handsome, he comes from a good family, and he worships the ground she walks on. He's the perfect accessory for Sarah's perfect life. That's when James did stand up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's enough," he said, his voice controlled but dangerous. "Rebecca, you need to stop this right now." But Rebecca was beyond stopping. She was in full performance mode now, feeding off the shock and discomfort in the room. "Oh, and James," she said, turning to face him directly, "you should know that Sarah has been planning your entire future together without consulting you. She's already picked out the house you're going to buy, the neighborhood where you'll live, even the names of your future children. You think you're getting a wife, but what you're really getting is a life manager who'll spend the next 50 years organizing you to death." I finally found my voice. "Rebecca, stop," I said, my words coming out hoarse and desperate. "Please, this is my wedding day." She turned to look at me, and for just a moment, I saw something like satisfaction in her eyes. "Your wedding day," she repeated mockingly. "Everything always has to be about you, doesn't it, Sarah? Your wedding, your dress, your perfect moment. Well, guess what? Some of us are tired of living in your shadow." The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. Some guests were clearly appalled by Rebecca's behavior, while others seemed to be buying into her narrative. I could see my cousin Jennifer whispering to her husband, shaking her head in apparent disapproval, though whether she disapproved of Rebecca's behavior or my alleged character flaws, I couldn't tell. My mother finally found her voice. "Rebecca, honey," she said shakily, "this isn't the time or place." "Now let's examine your accusations more closely," General Hawkins continued, her tone shifting into what I imagined she used during military briefings. "You claim Sarah sabotaged your college applications and threw away acceptance letters. Yet, you also claim she helped you prepare your portfolio and presentation. These statements are contradictory. Someone attempting sabotage wouldn't waste time actually helping you improve your work." She took another step forward. "You accuse Sarah of calling your employer to discuss your mental health. This is a serious allegation that could constitute workplace harassment if true. Have you filed a complaint with your company's human resources department? Have you documented these calls? Have you considered legal action for such a violation of your privacy?" Rebecca's mouth opened and closed without sound. It was becoming clear to everyone watching that she had no documentation, no evidence, no concrete proof of any of her claims. "You see," General Hawkins explained to the room, though her eyes remained fixed on Rebecca, "in the military, we deal with personnel conflicts regularly. When someone makes serious accusations against a fellow service member, we investigate thoroughly. We require evidence, witness statements, and documentation. We don't accept dramatic speeches delivered in front of an audience as sufficient proof of wrongdoing." The wedding guests were hanging on every word. Several people were nodding in agreement, clearly impressed by General Hawkins's methodical dismantling of Rebecca's accusations. "What we have here," the general continued, is a pattern of behavior that I've unfortunately witnessed before. Someone with deep personal insecurities projecting their own failings onto a convenient target. Rather than taking responsibility for their own choices and outcomes, they construct an elaborate narrative where they are the victim and everyone else is the villain. She gestured toward our parents, who were watching this exchange with a mixture of horror and fascination. Your parents are here tonight, Ms. Mitchell. They've raised both you and Sarah. If Sarah truly had this history of manipulative and controlling behavior, don't you think they would have noticed? Don't you think they would have intervened? My mother found her voice for the first time since Rebecca had begun her tirade. General Hawkins is right, she said shakily. Rebecca, honey, I don't know where these stories are coming from, but they're not true. Sarah has always been supportive of your dreams, sometimes to a fault. She's defended you and helped you more times than I can count. You're all against me, Rebecca said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had held earlier. You always have been. Sarah's the golden child, and I'm just disappointed. General Hawkins's expression softened slightly, showing a glimpse of compassion beneath her stern demeanor. Ms. Mitchell, I understand that sibling relationships can be complicated. I have a younger brother myself, and there were times growing up when I felt overshadowed by his achievements. It's natural to sometimes feel jealous or resentful. She moved closer to Rebecca, lowering her voice but still speaking clearly enough for the room to hear. But what you've done tonight goes far beyond normal sibling rivalry. You've attempted to destroy your sister's reputation on one of the most important days of her life. You've made serious false accusations that could damage her relationships and career. Most importantly, you've violated the fundamental trust that should exist between family members. Rebecca was beginning to tremble, and I could see sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning. The confidence and malicious energy she'd displayed earlier were draining away, replaced by what looked like genuine fear. In the military, General Hawkins continued, we have a concept called unit cohesion. It means that every member of the team has a responsibility to support and protect their fellow service members. When someone violates that trust, when they put their personal agenda ahead of the team's welfare, they face serious consequences. She straightened to her full height and somehow managed to seem imposing despite being shorter than Rebecca. You've demonstrated tonight that you have no concept of loyalty, honor, or basic decency. You've shown that you're willing to destroy someone who has loved and supported you simply because you feel sorry for yourself. The room was absolutely silent, except for the sound of Rebecca's increasingly labored breathing. She was clutching the microphone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. But here's what you've really accomplished tonight, Ms. Mitchell, General Hawkins said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. You've revealed your true character to everyone in this room. You've shown these people, Sarah's friends, colleagues, and family members, exactly who you are. And you've provided them with perfect clarity about who Sarah is by contrast. She gestured toward the guests, many of whom were nodding in agreement. Every person here has now witnessed Sarah's grace under pressure. They've seen her maintain her composure while being publicly attacked by someone she trusted. They've observed her restraint, her dignity, and her refusal to respond to cruelty with cruelty of her own. I felt tears beginning to flow, but for the first time tonight, they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of gratitude for this unexpected ally who had seen through Rebecca's performance and chosen to defend me. You wanted attention. Ms. Mitchell, General Hawkins continued relentlessly. You wanted to be the center of everyone's focus for once. Congratulations. You've succeeded. Everyone in this room will remember your performance tonight for the rest of their lives. She paused for effect, letting the weight of those words settle over Rebecca and the assembled guests. They'll remember it as the night Sarah Mitchell's sister revealed herself to be petty, jealous, and cruel. They'll remember it as the night someone tried to destroy a beautiful celebration out of pure spite. They'll remember it as the night. You chose to burn every bridge you had with your family because you couldn't stand seeing someone else be happy. Rebecca was swaying on her feet now, her face pale except for bright red spots on her cheeks. She looked like she might be having trouble breathing. "And years from now," General Hawkins said, building to her conclusion, "when people tell this story, and they will tell this story, you won't be remembered as the victim you tried to portray yourself as tonight. You'll be remembered as a cautionary tale about what happens when jealousy and resentment consume someone completely." General's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow every word carried clearly through the silent room. You could have been the loving sister who gave a heartfelt toast celebrating Sarah's happiness. You could have been the supportive family member who helped create beautiful memories on this special day. Instead, you chose to be the villain in your own sister's love story. She reached out and gently but firmly took the microphone from Rebecca's trembling hands. "And that, Ms. Mitchell, is how you'll be remembered by everyone who witnessed this display. Not as Sarah's wronged sister, but as the person who tried to destroy something beautiful because she couldn't bear to see someone else succeed." Rebecca stared at General Hawkins for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. The confident, malicious woman who had commanded the room 20 minutes ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and terrified. I was just, Rebecca started to say, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. "You were just what?" General Hawkins asked quietly. "You were just telling the truth? We've established that your accusations were fabricated. You were just expressing your feelings? There are appropriate venues for family discussions, and your sister's wedding reception is not one of them." She studied Rebecca's face with the analytical gaze of someone accustomed to reading people under stress. "Or perhaps you were just hoping to hurt Sarah so badly that she would never recover from this night. Is that what you were trying to accomplish?" Rebecca's breathing was becoming more rapid and shallow. She pressed one hand to her chest and reached out with the other as if searching for something to steady herself. "You see, Ms. Mitchell," General Hawkins continued, apparently oblivious to Rebecca's physical distress, "the problem with destroying other people is that it inevitably destroys the destroyer as well. You've burned your relationship with your sister, disappointed your parents, and humiliated yourself in front of 150 people." She gestured around the room at the faces staring back at Rebecca, some angry, some disgusted, some pitying, but none sympathetic to her cause. These people came here tonight to celebrate love, commitment, and family. Instead, you've forced them to witness a display of cruelty that they'll never forget. You've tainted what should have been a joyful memory for everyone present. Rebecca was swaying more pronounced now, one hand pressed against her forehead as if she were fighting off dizziness or nausea. "And for what?" General Hawkins asked with genuine puzzlement in her voice. "What did you hope to gain from this performance? Did you think people would rally to your side? Did you imagine that exposing Sarah's supposed flaws would somehow elevate your own standing?" She shook her head slowly, and for the first time, I heard something like disappointment in her voice. "All you've accomplished is proving that your sister is a far better person than you are. You've demonstrated that she has the strength of character to remain composed under attack, while you have so little self-control that you'll sabotage your own family relationships to feed your ego." Rebecca took a stumbling step backward, her face now completely drained of color. She was breathing in short, rapid gasps, and I could see perspiration running down her face despite the cool temperature in the room. "The saddest part," General Hawkins continued, apparently still not noticing Rebecca's deteriorating condition, "is that this was entirely unnecessary. You could have chosen to be happy for your sister. You could have found fulfillment in your own accomplishments rather than measuring yourself against someone else's success." She paused, studying Rebecca's face intently. "But instead, you chose to nurture your resentment until it poisoned everything good in your relationship with Sarah." You chose to believe your own victimization narrative rather than taking responsibility for your own life choices. Rebecca's hand flew to her throat, and she made a small choking sound. Her eyes were wide with what looked like panic, and she was now visibly shaking. And now, General Hawkins said, building toward her final point, you'll have to live with the consequences of tonight's choices for the rest of your life. You'll have to live with knowing that you tried to destroy someone who loved you. You'll have to live with knowing that your parents and extended family witnessed your true character tonight. She took one final step closer to Rebecca, close enough that she could have reached out and touched her. Most of all, Ms. Mitchell, you'll have to live with knowing that when your sister looks back on her wedding day, what should have been one of the happiest memories of her life, she'll always remember the night her own sister betrayed her in the cruelest way imaginable. That's when Rebecca collapsed. Rebecca crumpled to the marble floor like a marionette whose strings had been cut. One moment she was standing there, trembling and pale, and the next, she was lying motionless beside the head table, her navy blue dress spread around her like spilled ink. The sound of her body hitting the ground seemed to echo through the stunned silence of the reception hall. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The 150 wedding guests sat frozen in their chairs, as if they couldn't quite process what they'd just witnessed. Then chaos erupted. "Call 911!" someone shouted from the back of the room. James was already pulling out his phone, his fingers flying over the screen as he dialed emergency services. My mother screamed and rushed toward Rebecca, dropping to her knees beside my unconscious sister. "Rebecca! Rebecca, honey, wake up!" Mom's voice was high and panicked as she patted Rebecca's cheek gently, trying to rouse her. My father was right behind her, his face ashen as he knelt on Rebecca's other side. General Hawkins, to her credit, immediately switched from prosecutor to first responder. She knelt beside Rebecca and checked for a pulse, her fingers pressed against my sister's neck with practiced efficiency. "She's breathing and her pulse is steady," she announced to the room, her voice cutting through the panicked chatter. "It appears to be a fainting spell, likely caused by stress and hyperventilation." Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, James's aunt, and a cardiologist from San Francisco, pushed through the crowd of concerned guests. "I'm a doctor," she called out as she approached. "Please give me some room to examine her." The wedding guests stepped back, forming a wide circle around Rebecca's prone form. Dr. Morrison knelt beside her and began a quick assessment, checking her pulse, lifting her eyelids to examine her pupils, and listening to her breathing. "Her vitals are stable," Dr. Morrison confirmed after a few tense minutes. "General Hawkins is correct. This appears to be a vasovagal syncope episode. Essentially, the stress of the situation caused her blood pressure to drop suddenly, leading to temporary loss of consciousness." James finished his call with the paramedics and rejoined me at the head table, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. I was shaking, though whether from shock, adrenaline, or delayed emotional reaction to Rebecca's speech, I couldn't tell. The CIA. "Ambulance will be here in about 10 minutes, James murmured in my ear. "Are you okay?" I nodded mutely, though I wasn't sure if I was okay at all. Watching my sister collapse had been terrifying, but it also brought a strange sense of relief. Her unconscious form on the floor had finally ended the nightmare of her speech, the cruel words that had been tearing through me like physical wounds. Rebecca began to stir after about 5 minutes, her eyelids fluttering as she slowly regained consciousness. She looked around in confusion, clearly disoriented and trying to remember where she was and what had happened. "Take it easy, honey," Dr. Morrison said gently. "You fainted. Just lie still for a moment and let yourself orient." Recognition dawned slowly in Rebecca's eyes as the events of the evening came flooding back. I watched her face transform from confusion to embarrassment to something that looked like genuine horror as she realized that 150 people had just witnessed her collapse after delivering the most vicious speech in wedding history. "Oh, God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh, God, what did I do?" The paramedics arrived with impressive speed, wheeling a stretcher through the reception hall as wedding guests pressed themselves against the walls to make room. The lead paramedic, a competent-looking woman in her 40s, took over Rebecca's care from Dr. Morrison with professional efficiency. "Ma'am, I'm Kelly with the Seattle Fire Department," she said to Rebecca while checking her blood pressure. "Can you tell me your name and what happened tonight?" Rebecca tried to sit up, but Kelly gently pressed her back down. I'm Rebecca Mitchell. I was giving a speech and then I don't remember much after that." She fainted during an emotionally intense situation, Dr. Morrison explained to Kelly. "Her vitals have been stable throughout, and she's been conscious for about 10 minutes now." Kelly nodded and continued her assessment. Rebecca's blood pressure was slightly low, but not dangerously so, and her other vital signs were within normal ranges. "We'd like to transport you to the hospital for observation," Kelly explained. Fainting episodes should always be evaluated by a physician, especially when they occur during times of high stress. "No," Rebecca said suddenly, trying again to sit up. "No, I don't need to go to the hospital. I'm fine. I just need to go home." "Rebecca," my father interjected gently, "you should let them take you to get checked out, just to be safe." But Rebecca was becoming agitated, her breathing starting to quicken again. "I can't go to the hospital. I can't. Everyone will know. Everyone already knows." She looked around the room at all the faces staring down at her, and I saw tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Rebecca," I said softly, speaking for the first time since she'd collapsed. I moved away from James and knelt beside her, ignoring the surprised looks from my parents and the paramedics. "It's okay. Let them make sure you're all right." She looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of shame, fear, and something that might have been hope. "Sarah, what I said?" "We don't need to talk about that right now," I interrupted gently. "Right now, we just need to make sure you're okay." Rebecca started crying then, tears streaming down her face as she lay on the marble floor surrounded by the wreckage of my wedding reception. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so, so sorry. I don't know why I didn't mean. I know." I said, though I wasn't sure if I really did know. "We'll figure it out later. Right now, just focus on feeling better." The paramedics convinced Rebecca to accept transport to the hospital, and my parents rode in the ambulance with her. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle pulled away from the Grandview Country Club, I found myself standing in the parking lot in my wedding dress, watching the flashing lights disappear into the Seattle night. James appeared beside me, draping his suit jacket over my shoulders. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. I leaned against him, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I honestly don't know. This whole night feels like some kind of surreal dream. Did my sister really just try to destroy me in front of all our friends and family?" "She did," James said simply. "But she failed, and everyone saw that she failed." We walked back into the reception hall, where the guests were slowly beginning to resume their seats. The mood was subdued and awkward. Nobody quite knew how to return to celebrating after witnessing such a dramatic confrontation and medical emergency. General Hawkins approached us as we re-entered the room. For the first time all evening, she looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "Sarah, James," she began, "I owe you both an apology. I may have been too harsh in my response to Rebecca's speech. I certainly didn't intend for her to collapse, and I'm concerned that my words may have contributed to her medical episode." I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse there. "General, you were defending me when nobody else knew how to respond. Rebecca's collapse wasn't your fault. It was the result of her own choices and the pressure she put on herself. Nevertheless," the general continued, "I've seen combat stress reactions before, and I should have recognized the signs that she was becoming overwhelmed. My military training taught me to neutralize threats. But this was a family situation that required more diplomacy than I showed. James shook his head. General, with all due respect, what Rebecca did tonight was an attack. Maybe not a physical one, but it was definitely an assault on Sarah's character and reputation. You responded like the leader you are, and you said things that needed to be said. Our conversation was interrupted by the band leader, a nervous-looking man in his 50s who had been waiting uncertainly by the stage. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," he said hesitantly, do you want us to continue with the reception? We're not sure what the protocol is for this situation." James and I looked at each other, both of us realizing that we had no idea how to proceed either. We'd never imagined a scenario where the maid of honor would have a complete breakdown and require emergency medical transport in the middle of the reception. "Give us a few minutes," I told the band leader. "We need to figure out what we want to do." James took my hand and led me to a quiet corner of the reception hall where we could talk privately. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "It's your call. We can end the reception now if you're not up for continuing, or we can try to salvage what's left of the evening." I looked around the room at our guests, who were talking in small groups with subdued expressions. These were people who had traveled from across the country to celebrate with us. They'd taken time off work, bought gifts, and dressed up for what was supposed to be a joyful occasion. "I think we should continue," I said slowly. "Not because I particularly feel like celebrating right now, but because these people came here for us. Rebecca already stole enough of our wedding day. I don't want to let her take the rest of it too." James smiled and kissed my forehead. "That's my wife, always thinking about everyone else." We returned to the microphone, and James addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for your patience during this unexpected situation. Rebecca is conscious and stable, and she's being taken to the hospital for precautionary evaluation." He paused, looking around at the faces of our friends and family. "Sarah and I have decided that we'd like to continue with our reception. We know this evening has been unusual, but we're surrounded by people we love, and that's what really matters to us." There was a smattering of applause, and I could see relief on many faces. Our guests had been just as unsure how to proceed as we were. "However," I added, taking the microphone, "we completely understand if anyone feels uncomfortable staying or needs to leave early. Tonight has been emotionally intense, and we want everyone to do whatever feels right for them." To my surprise and gratitude, very few people chose to leave. Our college friends, work colleagues, and extended family members seemed determined to help us create some positive memories from what had started as a disaster. The band resumed playing, and slowly, tentatively, the reception began to regain some semblance of normalcy. People returned to their conversations, the bar reopened, and a few brave souls even ventured onto the dance floor. General Hawkins approached me again as I stood watching our guests gradually relax and begin to enjoy themselves again. "I wanted you to know," she said quietly, "that I've been thinking about what Rebecca said during her speech, and I believe I understand what happened tonight." I turned to face her, curious about her perspective. "What do you think was really going on?" "I think your sister has been struggling with feelings of inadequacy for a long time," the general said thoughtfully. "Sometimes when people feel powerless in their own lives, they lash out at the people closest to them, especially those they perceive as more successful." She watched James spinning one of his young cousins on the dance floor, both of them laughing. "Rebecca's accusations weren't really about you, Sarah. They were about her own pain and frustration with her life circumstances. Unfortunately, she chose to express those feelings in the most destructive way possible." "That doesn't excuse what she did," I said firmly. "No, it doesn't," General Hawkins agreed. "Actions have consequences, regardless of the underlying motivations. But understanding why someone behaves badly can sometimes help us figure out how to move forward." As the evening progressed, something remarkable began to happen. Our guests, rather than dwelling on the drama that had occurred earlier, seemed determined to create an atmosphere of love and celebration. Friends took turns sharing funny stories about James and me. His army buddies regaled everyone with tales from their deployment that somehow managed to be both hilarious and heartwarming. My college roommate gave an impromptu speech about our friendship that brought tears to my eyes. Good tears this time. The dancing picked up as the night wore on. James and I had our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and as he spun me around the dance floor, I felt some of the tension from earlier beginning to melt away. We were surrounded by people who loved us, people who had witnessed Rebecca's attack and chosen to stay anyway, chosen to help us reclaim our celebration. My parents returned from the hospital around 11 o'clock, looking tired but relieved. Dad found me during a slow dance with James and tapped his new son-in-law on the shoulder. "May I cut in?" he asked with a sad smile. James kissed my hand and stepped away, leaving me alone with my father on the dance floor. "How is she?" I asked as we began to sway to the music. "Physically, she's fine," Dad said quietly. "The doctors ran some tests and everything came back normal. The fainting was just stress-related, like the paramedic thought." "And emotionally?" Dad was quiet for a long moment. "She's devastated, Sarah. She keeps crying and asking what she's done to our family. She says she doesn't remember deciding to give that speech, that she wrote something completely different, and then somehow found herself saying all those horrible things." I processed this information as we continued dancing. "Do you believe her?" "I think I believe that she's horrified by her own behavior," Dad said carefully. "Whether she planned it or it was some kind of breakdown, I think she's genuinely shocked by what came out of her mouth tonight." The song ended, and Dad hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. This should have been a perfect night for you." "It wasn't perfect," I admitted. "But it wasn't ruined either. Look around, Dad. We're surrounded by people who love us enough to stay and help us celebrate despite everything that happened." He followed my gaze around the room, taking in the sight of our guests laughing, dancing, and clearly enjoying themselves. "You're right," he said with genuine surprise. "They did stay, didn't they?" "The people who matter stayed," I corrected. "And honestly, maybe that's more meaningful than a perfect evening would have been. Tonight showed us who our real friends are, and it showed everyone here what James and I are really made of." As the reception wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, James and I found ourselves receiving more heartfelt congratulations and expressions of love than we might have gotten during a normal wedding reception. People seemed moved by how we'd handled the crisis, and many told us they were inspired by our grace under pressure. General Hawkins was among the last to leave. She approached us as we stood by the door thanking departing guests. "I wanted to leave you with something," she said, pulling a small wrapped box from her purse. "This was going to be my wedding gift, but after tonight, it seems even more appropriate." I unwrapped the box to find a beautiful compass. Its brass surface engraved with our names and wedding date. "A compass always points true north," General Hawkins explained. "No matter how stormy the weather gets, no matter how lost you might feel, it always shows you the right direction. Tonight, you both showed that you have that same quality. You can find your way through any crisis because you know who you are and what you stand for." She shook hands with both of us. That's the foundation of a strong marriage, and it's also the foundation of good leadership. You'll both do well in life. As the last guests departed and the staff began cleaning up the reception hall, James and I found ourselves alone together for the first time since Rebecca's speech. We sat at the head table, still in our wedding attire, surrounded by the elegant remains of our celebration. "So," James said with a tired but genuine smile, "how do you think our first day as a married couple went?" I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time since the whole ordeal began. "Well, it was definitely memorable. I don't think anyone will forget our wedding anytime soon." Are you okay with that? James asked seriously. I know this wasn't what you planned. I considered his question carefully. You know what? I think I am okay with it. What happened tonight was horrible, and I'm still processing how I feel about Rebecca and what she did. But we handled it together, and we learned something important about ourselves and the people in our lives. I gestured around the now empty reception hall. Most of our guests stayed, James. They witnessed my sister trying to destroy me on my wedding day, and they chose to stay and help us celebrate anyway. That says something pretty wonderful about the community we've built around us. James reached across the table and took my hand. And you were incredible tonight. I've never been prouder to be married to anyone. Even though I come with apparently psychotic family members? I asked wryly. Every family has someone, James said with a grin. At least ours got it out of the way early. As we finally left the Grandview Country Club and drove toward our hotel, I reflected on everything that had happened. Rebecca's attack had been vicious and public, designed to humiliate me and destroy my reputation. But in the end, it backfired. Completely. Instead of damaging me, it had revealed her own character flaws to everyone present. Instead of ruining our wedding, it had shown our community exactly what kind of people James and I were under pressure. The real tragedy wasn't what Rebecca had tried to do to me. It was what she had done to herself. In her attempt to bring me down, she had destroyed her own relationships and reputation. She would have to live with the consequences of that choice for the rest of her life. But that was her burden to bear, not mine. James and I had a marriage to build and a future to create together. We'd already proven that we could weather unexpected storms as a team. As we pulled into the hotel parking lot, James turned to me with a mischievous smile. So, Mrs. Chen, ready to start our honeymoon? Ready? As I'll ever be, Mr. Chen, I replied, leaning over to kiss my husband. Our wedding day hadn't been perfect, but it had been ours. And sometimes, that's enough. 3 weeks after our wedding, I was sitting in my office at TechFlow Solutions, trying to focus on quarterly budget reports, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple but loaded. Sarah, it's Rebecca. I'm ready to talk when you are. No excuses this time, just the truth. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart rate picking up despite my efforts to stay calm. James and I had spent our honeymoon in Hawaii deliberately avoiding any discussion of Rebecca or the wedding incident. We'd agreed to deal with the fallout when we returned to real life. But now that the moment had arrived, I wasn't sure I was prepared. Since the wedding, I've received dozens of calls and messages from friends and family members wanting to check on me, share their thoughts about what happened, or simply express their continued support. My cousin Jennifer had called to apologize for initially seeming sympathetic to Rebecca's complaints. I was so shocked by what was happening that I didn't know how to react, she'd explained. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how completely unfair and cruel she was being. Similar conversations had played out with various relatives and family friends. The consensus seemed to be that Rebecca had suffered some kind of breakdown, and that her behavior was completely out of character for the sister everyone thought they knew. But I wasn't so sure it was out of character anymore. Looking back over our relationship with fresh eyes, I could see patterns I'd previously excused or ignored. My assistant knocked on my office door, interrupting my brooding. Sarah? Your sister is here to see you. She says she doesn't have an appointment, but she's hoping you'll talk to her. My stomach dropped. I'd been expecting Rebecca to reach out eventually, but I'd assumed it would be another phone call or text, not an ambush at my workplace. Did she say what she wants? Just that she needs to apologize and explain some things. She looks pretty rough, honestly. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. Part of me wanted to have security escort Rebecca from the building. After what she'd done at my wedding, she'd forfeited any right to demand my time and attention on her terms. But another part of me, the part that had been her big sister for 26 years, was curious about what she had to say. Send her, Amy, I decided. But leave my door open, and if things get heated, I want you to interrupt us. Rebecca appeared in my doorway a moment later, and I was shocked by her appearance. She'd lost weight. Her skin was pale and blotchy, and her usually perfect hair hung limp and unwashed around her face. She wore a simple black sweater and jeans, no makeup, and her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying recently. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly, hovering uncertainly just inside my office. "I know I don't deserve it." "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "But Rebecca, I want you to know up front that I'm not interested in more lies or manipulation. If you're here to make excuses or blame your behavior on anyone else, you can leave right now." She sat down heavily, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to tell you the truth about what happened at your wedding, and about other things. Things I should have told you years ago." I leaned, back in my chair, studying her face. "I'm listening." Rebecca took a shaky breath. "The speech I gave at your wedding, I wrote it 3 weeks before the ceremony. Not the supportive, loving speech I told you about, but the one you heard. I planned every word of it." The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had suspected as much. "Why?" "Because I was so angry," she said, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. "I was angry about everything. Your success, your perfect relationship, your perfect life. But mostly, I was angry because I knew that everyone at that wedding was going to see exactly what I'd always seen. That you're better than me in every possible way." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I told myself that if I could just make people see your flaws, maybe for once in my life, I wouldn't be the disappointment in the room. Maybe if I brought you down to my level, I wouldn't feel so pathetic by comparison." "So you decided to destroy my wedding day?" I said flatly. "I decided to destroy you," Rebecca corrected, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to hurt you so badly that you'd finally understand what it felt like to be me." The honesty was brutal, but somehow less painful than the lies she'd told before. At least now I was dealing with the truth instead of wondering what had really happened. "What about all those accusations you made?" I asked. "The college applications, calling your boss, undermining your confidence?" Rebecca looked down at her hands. "Most of it was completely made up. Some of it was twisted versions of things that really happened, but not the way I described them." "Explain." She took another shaky breath. "You did help me with my college applications, exactly the way you said. You spent hours working with me on my portfolio, and you never tried to sabotage anything. When I didn't get into my first choice school, you were nothing but supportive. Then why did you say I threw away your acceptance letter?" "Because I needed people to believe that my failures were someone else's fault," Rebecca said miserably. "I needed them to believe that I would have succeeded if you hadn't interfered. It was easier than admitting that I just wasn't good enough." I felt a mixture of relief and fury. Relief that I wasn't going crazy, that my memories of being a supportive sister were accurate. Fury that Rebecca had been willing to destroy those memories for everyone else just to make herself feel better. "What about the job? Did I ever call any of your employers?" "Never," Rebecca admitted. "But you did ask Mom and Dad about me losing jobs, and I convinced myself that you were trying to get information to use against me somehow. It wasn't true, but I made myself believe it because it was easier than taking responsibility for getting fired." "Getting fired?" "Rebecca, you told us you were changing career paths. You said you were exploring different opportunities." She laughed bitterly. "I've been fired from 4 different jobs in the past 2 years, Sarah. Fired for showing up late, for attitude problems, for not meeting deadlines. I kept telling myself it was because my bosses didn't appreciate my creativity, or because office politics were working against me. But the truth is that I'm just not very good at anything." The admission hung in the air between us. I could see how much it cost her to say those words out loud. Rebecca, being bad at specific jobs doesn't make you worthless as a person, I said carefully. But lying about it and blaming other people for your problems does make it impossible for anyone to help you. I know, she said. And I know that's what I've been doing our whole lives. Every time something went wrong for me, I found a way to make it about you somehow. When I didn't make the art club in high school, it was because you were getting all the attention for soccer. When I struggled in college, it was because you'd set impossible standards for academic achievement. She looked up at me with genuine remorse in her eyes. The truth is that watching you succeed at everything you tried made me feel like a complete failure. Instead of being inspired by your example or proud of my sister's accomplishments, I let it make me bitter and resentful. So you decided to punish me for succeeding? I asked. I decided to punish you for making me feel bad about myself, Rebecca corrected. Which I know now is completely unfair and irrational, but at the time it made perfect sense to me. I got up from my desk and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline while I processed everything she was telling me. Rebecca, do you understand what you did to me at my wedding? Do you understand how it felt to have my own sister try to destroy me in front of everyone I care about? I think I'm starting to, she said quietly. I've spent the last 3 weeks replaying that night over and over, and I keep thinking about how you looked when I was saying those things. You looked devastated and confused, like you couldn't understand how someone you loved could be so cruel to you. I turned back to face her. That's exactly how I felt. I've been seeing a therapist, Rebecca said suddenly. Dr. Amanda Foster. She specializes in family dynamics and self-esteem issues. I started going the day after your wedding, and we've been meeting 3 times a week. What does she say about all this? Rebecca was quiet for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. She says I have what she calls chronic comparison syndrome. Basically, I've spent so much of my life measuring myself against you that I've never developed a sense of my own worth, independent of how I stack up against my big sister. That's not my fault, I said firmly. No, it's not, Rebecca agreed. Dr. Foster has been very clear about that. She says that siblings often have different strengths and follow different paths, and that healthy people learn to celebrate those differences rather than feeling threatened by them. She stood up and moved closer to the window where I was standing. She also says that what I did at your wedding was a form of emotional abuse, that even if I was struggling with my own issues, that didn't give me the right to attack you publicly or try to damage your relationships. Hearing her use the word abuse was jarring, but I realized it was accurate. What Rebecca had done was abusive, even if it came from a place of pain rather than malice. Dr. Foster thinks I should be prepared for the possibility that you might never forgive me, Rebecca continued. She says that when someone violates trust as completely as I did, the relationship might not be salvageable. What do you think about that? I asked. Rebecca was quiet for a long time, tears streaming down her face. I think she might be right, she finally said. I think I might have destroyed our relationship permanently, and I think I deserve whatever consequences come from that. But you're here anyway. I'm here because I needed you to know the truth, she said. Not because I expect forgiveness, or because I think we can go back to the way things were, but because you deserve to know that none of this was really about you. It was about me and my own problems, and you shouldn't have to carry the weight of wondering what you did wrong. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of the knot of confusion and hurt that had been sitting in my chest since the wedding. Knowing that Rebecca's attack had been about her own insecurities rather than actual flaws in my character didn't erase the damage, but it did provide some clarity. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, Rebecca admitted. I'm going to keep working with Dr. Foster. I'm going to try to figure out who I am when I'm not defining myself in opposition to you. And I'm going to face the consequences of what I did to our family. What consequences? Rebecca's face crumpled. Mom and Dad are barely speaking to me. They're not cutting me off completely, but they've made it clear that they're disappointed and ashamed of my behavior. Grandma Mitchell called me last week to tell me that she's removing me from her will because she can't support someone who would attack family the way I attacked you. I winced. Grandma Mitchell was our father's mother, a stern woman who valued family loyalty above almost everything else. Being cut from her will was more about the symbolic rejection than the money. Some of our cousins won't return my calls, Rebecca continued. Uncle Tom told Mom that he thinks I need professional help and that he doesn't want me around his kids until I get it. Even some of my own friends have pulled away after hearing about what happened. I'm sorry, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Don't be sorry, Rebecca said firmly. I earned all of this. My actions had consequences, and I'm finally having to face them instead of blaming someone else. She moved toward the door, then turned back to face me. Sarah, I want you to know that everything I said at your wedding was wrong. You're not manipulative or controlling or self-centered. You're actually one of the most generous, supportive people I know, and I've been incredibly lucky to have you as a sister. Rebecca, let me finish, she interrupted. You've spent our entire lives trying to help me, encourage me, and build me up. You've celebrated my successes and supported me through my failures. You've been exactly the kind of sister anyone would want to have. She paused, wiping away fresh tears. The fact that I repaid all of that love and support by trying to destroy you publicly says everything about who I am as a person, and nothing about who you are. She opened the door to leave, then turned back one final time. I don't expect you to forgive me, and I don't expect us to have a relationship going forward. But I needed you to know that you didn't deserve what I did to you, and that you shouldn't. Let my problems make you doubt yourself or change who you are. After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, trying to process everything she'd told me. The conversation had been painful, but also strangely healing. For the first time since the wedding, I felt like I understood what had really happened and why. That evening, I told James about Rebecca's visit over dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant. He listened without interrupting, occasionally reaching across the table to squeeze my hand when I got emotional recounting parts of the conversation. How do you feel about everything she told you? He asked when I finished. Relief, mostly, I said after thinking about it. Relief that I wasn't going crazy, that my memories of our relationship were accurate. Relief that her attack really wasn't about anything I'd done wrong. But also sad, I admitted. Sad that she's been carrying around all this resentment and insecurity for years without ever talking to me about it. Sad that she felt like she had to tear me down in order to feel better about herself. James nodded thoughtfully. Do you think you'll be able to have a relationship with her going forward? I honestly don't know, I said. What she did was so damaging and hurtful that I'm not sure trust can ever be rebuilt. But at least now I understand that it came from a place of pain rather than genuine hatred. That's something, I guess. Dr. Foster, her therapist, was right about one thing. Rebecca violated trust so completely that our relationship might not be salvageable. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. James reached across the table and took both of my hands in his. Whatever you decide about Rebecca, I'll support you. But don't feel like you have to forgive her or maintain a relationship with her just because she's family. You have every right to protect yourself from people who've shown they're willing to hurt you. Even if they're sorry? Being sorry doesn't automatically erase the consequences of your actions, James said gently. Rebecca is learning that the hard way. As we walked home from the restaurant, I found myself thinking about General Hawkins's words at our wedding reception. She'd said that Rebecca would have to live with the consequences of her choices for the rest of her life. At the time, it had sounded like a harsh judgment. Now I understood it was simply the truth. Rebecca had made her choice when she decided to write that speech. She'd made it again when she decided to deliver it instead of the loving toast she'd promised. And she'd made it a third time when she'd chosen to continue her attack, even as she could see the pain she was causing. Those choices had consequences that extended far beyond our family. Everyone who attended our wedding would remember Rebecca as the sister who tried to destroy the bride on her special day. That reputation would follow her in our community for years to come. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the loss of our relationship. We'd been sisters for 26 years, but trust, once broken so completely, might be impossible to repair. Rebecca would have to live with knowing that her moment of cruelty had cost her the one person who had always been in her corner. As James and I climbed the stairs to our apartment, I realized that while Rebecca's confession had provided closure, it had also confirmed something I'd been reluctant to accept. Some damage can't be undone, no matter how sincere the apology. Our sisterhood, as we'd known it, was over. Whether something new could eventually take its place remained to be seen. But for the first time since our wedding day, I felt truly free from the weight of Rebecca's accusations. I knew who I was. I knew what kind of sister I'd been, and I knew that her pain didn't define my worth. That knowledge, hard-won though it was, felt like victory enough. 1 year later, James and I stood in the same reception hall at the Grandview Country Club. But this time we were celebrating our friends Marcus and Jennifer's wedding. As I watched Jennifer walk down the aisle in her stunning ivory gown, I felt a bittersweet mixture of joy and memory. Marcus, James's army buddy who had been his best man, had started dating my cousin Jennifer 6 months after our wedding. They'd bonded over the shared experience of witnessing what Jennifer now called the most dramatic wedding reception in family history. Their relationship had blossomed quickly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection that was beautiful to witness. "Strange being back here," James murmured in my ear as we took our seats for the ceremony. "Good strange or bad strange?" I whispered back. He squeezed my hand. "Mostly good. It feels like we're reclaiming this place." The ceremony was lovely and mercifully drama-free. Jennifer radiated happiness, Marcus couldn't stop grinning, and their vows brought tears to my eyes. As they sealed their marriage with a kiss, I found myself thinking about the journey James and I had taken over the past year. Those first few months after Rebecca's confession had been difficult. I'd struggled with alternating waves of anger, sadness, and relief. Some days I felt grateful to finally understand what had happened. Other days I felt furious all over again about the betrayal. James had been incredibly patient, listening when I needed to talk and giving me space when I needed to process alone. Rebecca had kept her word about continuing therapy. Through our parents, I'd learned that she was making progress with Dr. Foster and had finally found stable employment at a small marketing firm. She'd also started volunteering at a local community center, teaching art classes to underprivileged children. Mom said it seemed to be giving her a sense of purpose she'd been missing. We hadn't spoken since that day in my office. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful reunion, no moment when everything suddenly became okay between us. Instead, there had been a gradual acceptance that our relationship, as it had existed for 26 years, was over. During the reception, General Hawkins approached our table. She looked elegant in a navy blue dress, her silver hair perfectly styled, and she carried herself with the same commanding presence I remembered from our wedding. "Sarah, James," she said warmly. "Wonderful to see you both again. How are you?" "We're doing very well, General," James replied, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you for asking." She studied my face with those penetrating blue eyes. "You look peaceful," she observed. "That's good to see." "I feel peaceful," I admitted. It took some time, but I think I've finally processed everything that happened. General Hawkins nodded approvingly. Time has a way of providing perspective on difficult situations. What seemed catastrophic in the moment often reveals its true significance later. Have you heard anything about Rebecca? She asked gently. She's doing better, from what I understand, I said. Getting help, finding her own path. We're not in contact, but I wish her well. That's very mature of you, the general said. Not everyone could maintain that level of grace after what you experienced. As she moved on to greet other guests, I reflected on her words. Grace wasn't something I'd felt during those dark weeks after our wedding, but maybe it was something I'd grown into over time. The evening progressed beautifully. Marcus and Jennifer's speeches were heartfelt and joyful, focusing on their love story and future together. When it came time for dancing, James and I took to the floor with genuine happiness, no shadows from the past clouding our celebration. Look, at that, James said, nodding toward the head table where Jennifer's sister was giving a touching toast about childhood memories and sisterly love. That's how it's supposed to be done. Yes, I agreed. It is. As we drove home that night, James asked the question that had been hanging unspoken between us for months. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Rebecca completely? I considered his words carefully. I think I already have, in a way. Not because what she did was okay, and not because I want her back in my life the way she used to be, but because holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting her. So you've let it go. I've let go of the need for her to be different than she is, I clarified. I've accepted that she made choices that have consequences, and that our relationship was one of those consequences. 6 months later, I received an unexpected piece of mail, a small package with no return address. Inside was a beautiful watercolor painting of 2 little girls sitting under a tree, one reading to the other. At the bottom, in Rebecca's distinctive handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for all the stories, big sister." There was no note, no request for contact, no attempt to reopen communication. Just an acknowledgement of something good from our shared past, offered without expectation of response. I showed the painting to James, and we decided to hang it in our guest bedroom. Not prominent enough to be painful, but present enough to honor what had once been beautiful between Rebecca and me. Do you think she's really changed? James asked as we positioned the frame on the wall. I think she's trying to, I said, and that's all anyone can do. 2 years after our wedding, James and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Emma Patricia, her middle name chosen to honor General Hawkins. As I held my newborn daughter in my arms, I found myself thinking about the kind of sister I hoped she would be if we had more children. I wanted her to be supportive without being controlling, successful without being intimidating, confident without being arrogant. Most of all, I wanted her to understand that love isn't a competition. There's always enough to go around. Rebecca never reached out after sending the painting, and I never responded to it. But sometimes I wondered if she thought about me, if she remembered the good times we'd shared before jealousy poisoned everything between us. I hoped she had found peace with herself and her choices. I hoped she had learned to measure her worth by her own standards, rather than in comparison to others. I hoped she had discovered that happiness comes from building something meaningful, not from tearing other people down. As for me, I had learned that family isn't just about blood relationships. It's about the people who choose to stand by you when things get difficult. James, my parents, General Hawkins, and all the wedding guests who stayed to celebrate with us despite the chaos, those were my real family. Rebecca's betrayal had taught me that trust, once broken, might never fully heal. But it had also taught me to recognize and value the people in my life who had never given me reason to doubt their loyalty. In the end, that lesson was worth more than any sister's speech could ever have been. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.